I think we should be good. All right, good evening, everyone. Today is July 13th, 2021. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you, God, for yet another opportunity of prayer. We ask you, God, that you will comfort and keep those that are going through in this time, oh God. I ask you, God, that you will protect our children, that you will protect everyone that's affected by the storms this week, oh God. I ask you, God, that you will be with them, comfort them, keep them as well, oh God. I ask you, God, that you will bless my guests as well as the viewers. I ask you, God, that you will help us to have a enjoyable and educational conversation about this controversial topic. And we ask you, God, that we walk away with it with a better understanding of one another, what critical race theory is, and a better understanding of who you are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome everyone to the show. Want to give a happy born day shout out to my cousin Eric, who celebrated over the weekend. Spoonie G wife over the weekend as well. Then we have my younger brother John Edwards. Love you, bro. Happy born day. His birthday is actually today, and I want to give an early born day shout out to Elizabeth Caldwell, who will be celebrating her born day on Saturday. Looking forward to that. I hope you enjoy your day as well. As I share with the guests, thank God, thanks be to the God that we serve, that I'm not reporting any deaths that I know of this week. So that's a break from the normal opening up, which I thank God for that. And I hope that everyone is watching this in good health as well. As usual, add your comments to the show. What's good, Tahi? Thanks for tuning in. And as you guys come on in, if you don't mind, would you please share the show, if you don't mind, to your page so that your friends will also be a part of the conversation. And any comments or questions that you have, you guys can feel free to put them in the comment section, and we'll try to get to them. All right. With that being said, let me introduce tonight's guest. I want to introduce first Miss Cindi Ferguson. I believe, a former educator. Did I say that correct? Okay, a former educator. That's with us tonight from the state of Texas, born and raised. Thank you for being a part of this conversation, Cindi. I reached out to you last minute and you accepted, so I really want to thank you publicly for that, as well as the beautiful Miss Shauna. I met her maybe 2 years ago, I believe, and just seemed to be a very intelligent, beautiful, bright young woman. And I seen that she actually had a show, or she was on a panel dealing with critical race theory a couple of weeks ago. So I thought it would be fitting to have her. And thank you for being as well, Shauna. And then last but not least, it might have been maybe 30 minutes ago, I asked my boy if he wanted to pop on and be a part of this conversation. None other than my brother, soul brother number one, Ed, Principal Edward Wilson. Thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for being on this forum. And I offered it to you, Ed, because I wasn't sure if you wanted to take part in this, being an administrator. I wasn't sure how that would work, but you know me.
Yeah.
There is nothing that's too controversial that we can't talk about, and that's what this show is all about. Right. So I want to thank all you guys for being here, and that's exactly what we're going to get into tonight: critical race theory. This is something that I'm not familiar with. I'm not thoroughly educated in this particular subject, but it has piqued my curiosity. I believe it was maybe a month or so ago. I was having a conversation with someone, and they were talking to me about how this should be taught in schools. And initially, I didn't agree with that because again, I didn't know what critical race theory meant, so to speak, and I was just going based off of the terminology, a basic understanding, until I actually looked it up. And one of the things that made me want to really research this thing was, I'm gonna try to see if you guys can see this here, but someone sent me a photo of why it should be necessary. Now, I'm not sure if you all can see this. Let's see. This is a publication that a young woman, I believe she was Indian or Indian American, or might have been white. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what her nationality is, but she wrote it, and it was against the publishing company that for her son's public school. So her son came to school, and this is what the quote is, because I don't realize you guys can't see it. It says the Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s to 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations. Now, that's when it became problematic to me, okay? Because first of all, it's one thing whether you want to debate whether or not racism or slavery should be taught in American schools. That's up for debate. I don't have no that you don't have no argument with me for that. Where I do have a problem is if we do agree that we are going to teach slavery being a part of our history as American citizens, I refuse for you to misquote the enslaved indigenous people of Africa as workers. They did not come over here for jobs. Like, I find that highly offensive that you would that will be in publication for the schools. And which brought me to, okay, let me really find out what this critical race theory is and do some research. So with that being said, I'm gonna start off with you, Shauna. Like, what is your understanding or what is your definition of critical race theory?
Okay, thank you, Marvin.
Okay.
So I'll start by saying that I'm not surprised that you hadn't heard of critical race theory before about a month ago. Critical race theory until recently has been it's been a framework that's been used in graduate studies in academia. I myself, when I did my own Facebook Live talk a couple of weeks ago, I expressed my surprise at how much it had like blown up. So I'm currently in a doctoral program. I'm getting my EDD in educational administration, and the framework that I'm using is critical race theory. So the function of it is for you to frame a particular issue or set of issues to help explain it in academic terms. I will say that I do fully believe that the focus it's getting in the media now is misinterpreted. I do think the common, like not common, but I think the general public at large, when they're talking about it, I think they're misunderstanding because I think it's been misrepresented. I'm also a veteran teacher. I was a classroom teacher for 12 years, an instructional coach for 3 years, and then a district level administrator for 2 years. And never once in that tenure did I know of anybody, myself included, that actually taught critical race theory in public schools. Like I said, I was introduced to it in graduate school. Now, whether or not, so I'll kind of set that to the side. Now, whether or not, I know you're wondering about whether or not it should be taught or not taught. That maybe we'll get to later in our discussion, but the way I describe it, and from my research and just my experience working with critical race theory as part of my dissertation, it's derived from critical theory, which is critical theory is a theory that is old. Well, I wouldn't say it's like old, but it comes out of what we call the Frankfurt School of philosophers. So critical theory is actually derived from westernized white men, and critical race theory is a branch of that. So I know that critical race theory is starting to kind of polarize people along racial lines, but what I always find interesting is that critical race theory itself comes from a theory that was conceptualized by Western white men. So, and in addition to critical race theory, there are all sorts of what we in the academic world call crits. So there's critical Latino theory, there's critical queer theory, there's critical feminist theory, there's critical whiteness studies. And so for some reason, we have glommed on to critical race theory. It did start in the legal field. So critical race theory started, Derek Bell is most commonly attributed to critical race theory as it applies in the legal field. He saw a need to in the legal world to explain the oppression that people of color were facing in this country. And it wasn't, what he wanted to get across to people, the legal world, people in general, is that racism wasn't these one-off, like, individualized, bigoted encounters, that it was deeply embedded in the structure of our country. The way our country was structured is what has created these oppressive systemic barriers that people of color are facing even today. And so from his conceptualization of critical race theory in the legal field, other disciplines, mostly social sciences, have adapted critical race theory to align and explain phenomena with people of color in their own disciplines. And so education is one of those. So Gloria Ladson-Billings, she's a big name in education, period, but she also did a lot of groundbreaking work with critical race theory. And there's others, Yasso and Soloranzo. I mean, I can give you all sorts of names, but education has been applying critical race theory at least for almost 30 years, and maybe even longer. But my research extends back to like the early 90s, late 80s, when Gloria Ladson-Billings was really at her height. And so it's a way of explaining just the oppressive social structures that people of color face in this country. And it is divided. It's organized, to me, in a pragmatic type way. It's organized into different tenets. So the different tenets, or you can almost think of them as buckets of or pockets of oppression. So basically, there's it's just these ways of explaining how race permeates everything in our society. So one of the biggest ones is the permanence of race. And so that's kind of the critical tenet. And it basically, when you're looking at the tenet of permanence of race, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's that racism is both conscious and unconscious, and is a permanent component of American life. And that goes back to how our country was structured. There's others.
Hold on, let me stop you there,
Okay,
Shauna,
yes,
because
okay,
we're gonna
sorry,
get into
okay,
that part
right,
on the educational side of things. What is your understanding, or what does it mean to you, Cindi? Do you think the term of critical?
Just listening to everything she says, because she seems to know it. My understanding of, well, number one, let me start here. My biggest problem right now is not CRT. It's the fact that it's been polarized. It's the fact that it's been used by politicians as a means of fear mongering to try to win back suburban voters that left in the last election. So they have done everything they can for culture wars, and this is just their latest device that they're using. Now, honestly, I knew absolutely nothing about it until it hit the news, until I started seeing people at school board meetings throwing up their hands, screaming, and being kicked out because they were wanting critical race theory not to be taught in their schools. Well, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I thought that was hilarious when I reached out to you what you said. I hope you don't mind me saying it publicly.
No,
I thought it was real funny that you would say, yeah, I have no problem talking about this, being that I'm not at the Board of Education
No,
protesting that they teach something that's not even being taught.
no, because it took me all of 5 seconds for a Google search
Yeah, exactly.
to find out that it's only taught in law school
Mhm.
and some in the military for a specific reason,
As
to
a
discover how our laws were created with a bias.
Exactly.
I don't have an issue with that. Do I think it's appropriate for kindergarten? Probably not, only because they're not old enough to understand.
Mhm.
Yet, we've got states that have gone and passed legislation to make sure that teachers cannot
Never.
teach this.
Exactly.
Now, how do you teach the Civil War? How do you teach voting rights?
Exactly.
How do you teach anything in American history without somehow making it understood the before, the during, and the after?
Absolutely.
I don't understand how you can do it. I feel for teachers who teach history right now, especially in those states that have enacted this legislation, because I think it's done for the wrong reason. It's not done because they know what it is and they don't agree. It's done because of a political motivation. Has nothing to do with anything truthful, which is a lot of where politics is right now anyway. So, but no, I'm just soaking up everything Shauna's saying.
Okay.
Because
All right. So
I'm getting a cram lesson right now. I mean, I've done some research on it. I've kind of gotten a taste for it, but she's presenting a whole lot of information in a concise manner that I can understand. So,
and we thank you for that, Shauna. And we're gonna let you educate us some more. What you got on critical race theory, Ed?
So first of all, thank you for the invite. That was literally like about 20 minutes ago.
Lots of time to prepare.
I literally
nothing like a true friend.
Right. I literally just walked in the house and said, "Let me jump on real quick." But no, I think to what Cindi mentioned, I think Shauna did an outstanding job with laying the foundation in the context in which you have to look at and, more importantly, understand critical race theory. And then Cindi also added on to what I was going to say, which is that it's totally misrepresented and misunderstood within the school system. It has become very politicized, in addition to polarizing different factions of people within society. But I think, again, Cindi hit it right on the head with regards to the political nature of how it's become. And again, it's definitely misrepresented in the sense that no one is accusing anyone of being racist or bigots or anything like that. You're trying to embrace a mindset that when you look at the history of this country, the history of this country is the history of this country.
Right.
That is a fact. You cannot get around that. And Shauna was actually about to go into the tenets. And I'll be honest with you, I even I was going to say this, when I was going through my doctoral program, I actually used critical race theory as a basis for part of my research as well too. And that was actually that honestly was the first time that I came across it. And I was actually a history teacher. So I found that very interesting that, when you look at that theory from that perspective, how I don't want to say isolated, but pretty much isolated it really is or was prior to now. But one of the other tenets, and there's about there's about five of the tenets, but two of them I wanted to really point out very quickly. One being whiteness is property. Well, I'm sorry, not whiteness is property. That is one of them. But the storytelling and the counter storytelling is one perspective. One tenet. But the other one is the interest convergence. And I think this will, in addition to what both Shauna and Cindi mentioned, when you look at interest convergence within the context of critical race theory, you're basically looking at it from the vantage point of how will this benefit me? Plain and simple. Now, when you add the component of race into it, it takes on a whole nother dimension. So if you look at, I'll give you a perfect example. If you look at Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, desegregated schools, right? It's not so much, what you have to look at it in terms of the interest. was it really in the interest of the government at the time to desegregate schools, or to really, really combat the growing Cold War that was emerging pretty soon? Because at that time, you have to remember the United States view in terms of the world, looking at, Civil War, slavery, Reconstruction, all those periods, how the United States was viewed by other countries was very influential in terms of trade, international business, and so on and so forth. So it almost became necessary for the United States, or in the interest of the United States, to do something about desegregation, desegregating schools. Because how can you claim to be this major world power, but yet you still have this one group of people, African Americans or former slaves, still don't have access to basic education? And so again, it became in the best interest of the government to do something about that. That's why you have Brown versus Board of Education. And you could even take that and fast forward that to the Civil Rights Movement, because it's the same exact thing. And one last thing, and then I'll turn it back over to you, was when we have these conversations in these spaces, I'm amazed how people feel threatened that you're attacking them personally or individually. And that's not the case. Because if you're complicit in what goes on, it's like no longer, those days are done. If you see any kind of, I don't care who you are, black, white, whatever, Asian, whether it's xenophobia, racism, feminism, whatever it is, if you remain complicit to things that you see that are injustice, then you are just as guilty as a person committing the act of prejudice. Absolutely. Because we're in 2021, and we saw what happened down in Washington, D.C. on the Capitol. That's just amazing to me. Again, you have, and this goes to Cindy's point, how politicized it's become, that when you look at critical race theory, again, people are only looking at it from the lens of, one, what's put out there by the media, and then two, from a political standpoint.
Most of it's by what's put out by the media.
Correct.
Literally, it took me 5 minutes to Google it.
That's all you have to do. And like I said, I was fortunate because I used it during my dissertation. But for people who, again, know nothing about critical race,
right,
like Cindi just did, all you have to do is go on the internet, and you'll have like over 1,000 hits.
Right.
Yeah. And I've literally been on there for like I said, I plan on doing this show maybe about 3 weeks to a month now. So I've been heavy researching YouTube, Google articles. Shauna sent me some good information to read up on. And the thing that baffles me the most, or the most thing that I find most problematic about the whole situation is, one, critical race theory is not a thing. It's a theory. I think that's where people got to realize and understand first and foremost, before you get so outraged. What are you teaching my children? Okay, it's just a theory. It's no different than conspiracy theories or anything else. It's just a theory. So therefore, let's calm down and find out exactly what it is first. Like you say, before you get outraged, let's find out exactly what it is. And I've seen from what's his name, the guy with that messed up Texas, ran for president. I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, Ted Cruz.
There you go, Ted Cruz. Even Biden.
Cancun Cruz.
Yeah, there you go. I was about to say the one that disappeared.
Yeah, Cancun Cruz while we were freezing. Yeah.
God forbid if he had actually won the presidency, we could imagine what would happen when he, you know what I mean? But that's something different.
Yeah, that's another show.
They talk about how this is like the new version of the KKK, and this is teaching racism to our children and all this here. And not one piece that I have seen, not one article that I have read has said that this is that all white people are racist.
Right.
You know what I mean? It talks about how it's systematically racism. That's totally different. And I don't like I don't want to bring spirituality into it, but I associate it to the same thing as a preacher. Okay, as a preacher, I preach according to my belief system in Christianity. I preach against homosexuality, right? But does that mean that I hate homosexuals? Absolutely not. Some of my closest friends, some of my family members are homosexuals. I don't love them any less. So it's not about let's stop you, because we gotta realize that words are powerful.
Mhm.
And just because people put words out there a certain type of way does not make them true. Critical
Right.
race theory is not teaching that all white people are devils. You have people that say that, but just because a pastor gets up and calls homosexuals faggots and sissies and all that did, he's not speaking for me, because those are hate words as far as I'm concerned. And I can't reach anybody that I'm condemning on that level. You see what I'm saying? I can speak against your sin, but it's not a personal attack on you as an individual. And I think people need to know how to disassociate the two, because it's very important that we could do that. Now,
But isn't that part of our cultural problem right now with the polarization? Is that we've taken it to a level of personal attack, or we've allowed some to take everything to a level of personal attack, when not too horribly long ago, most people were just like you and me, where you can hate the sin, love the sinner. Now it's become personal attacks. And I find that really disturbing.
It is very disturbing, because we live in a society now, like and I'm not a fan of it whatsoever. As much as loving as an individual as I am, I like to consider myself fair, but I absolutely hate that we live in a participation era where everybody gets to voice their opinion. Everybody, just because I participated, I should get a trophy just for participating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though I played a basketball game with Stacey Adams on, I should get the same trophy as LeBron James. No, you should not. You did not earn that right to get the same notarization. So I think when we talking about that there, and I really wanted to have you on specifically, Cindi, because you are an former educator and you're a white American, and this is my thing with when we're talking about not just critical race theory in itself as a theory, but when we're talking about slavery, when we're talking about racism in this country, I think it's very, very important. Back to, again, how words are important. I think it's very, very important that we teach history in its true essence.
Amen.
The good and the bad.
And the
I would
ugly.
never tell a woman that's a victim of rape, okay, well, maybe if you had just looked at it like another sexual experience, you might have enjoyed it better.
Right.
So, but you need to get over it, because all it's going to do is hold you back. That is totally insensitive, and I feel like that's what society is trying to do with us.
Right.
And I do believe that there's a subculture in the politics, right? Democrats and Republicans,
Right.
from the white community, that they feel like, well, if we tell the truth, if we talk about all those bad things, it might cause this revolution or whatever the case may be.
Like we don't already know.
Exactly. So I don't understand why is it such a big deal to actually teach the truth. Not what you want me to know, but the actual truth.
Right. But again, if you remain complicit in any act of discrimination or prejudice or anything like that, then to me, you're really just as guilty, because you're not, if you really want to see change, and like we have a diverse, panel tonight. But if you really want to see the change that, people are talking about and things like that, then you hold people accountable. Cindi, I'm sure you may have friends or associates who, they may have certain conversations that you probably would be appalled or whatnot.
Right.
But I'm also sure you hold them accountable.
Yeah, most of them don't pull that in front of me anymore.
Right. Yeah,
especially in front of a crowd.
Right, and they know that, because they know you're going to call them on it and you're going to check them on it. And that's my point. You can't remain complicit to people who think that saying things out of off the cuff or whatever you want to call it, that it's okay. It's not. And this is where we are now. And when you look at critical race theory, again, people are really misunderstood in terms of what it really is about. One of the other tenets about it, and I kind of mentioned it, I'm sorry, I know Shauna was going to, I think, revisit the rest of them, is the storytelling or the counter storytelling, which is very important, because when we talk about storytelling, from whose perspective?
There you go.
As you opened up, the discussion, and I think Shauna, again, she did an outstanding job laying it out, and I think Cindi even touched on it as well too. When you talk about whose perspective, that becomes the question, because are you talking from the oppressed or the oppressor? So
Right.
with critical race theory, that counter storytelling becomes from the perspective of the oppressed to challenge or counter the,
Mhm.
the oppressor.
Yeah.
And it
So
goes back to how we was taught growing up, Ed.
Oh,
Say
yeah,
what you mean and mean what you say. Everybody that's talking about it, they want to see change, don't necessarily want to see change, but it sounds good.
Right.
Mhm.
So I am using counter storytelling to frame my dissertation. So I'm looking at Black principles and just how they navigate two worlds. So basically double consciousness. Like how do they navigate being Black in a racialized education system? Now, the education system doesn't blatantly say it's racialized, it's a de facto racialized system.
Mhm.
There's a lot of external factors that make it that way. But if you look at the ideology behind public education in this country, it's supposed to be the great equalizer. You go to school, you work hard, you'll be able to have the same opportunity as anybody else. And we know that's not true. That is definitely not true, because all public schools, I'm going to limit it to public schools because that's my experience, that's my work experience. They're not all created equally. And there is a body of research that controls for things like socioeconomics, because whenever the discussion of race comes up, people tend to conflate it with socioeconomics and who has these resources and who doesn't have these resources. Yes, that plays a part in it, but there's also a pretty substantial body of research that suggests it is race. Race in and of itself is an indicator of a student's success in school, no matter what their economic standing is, no matter what opportunities they may be faced with. Race is still an indicator of their success in school. And so that's why in graduate schools and schools of education where CRT is normally taught, that's why it's taught, so that we can examine these very factual things through a lens of race, because race hasn't been theorized in the academy until like the 60s, 70s, 80s. Like it's been a lot. It's only been very recently that people have started to actually theorize race and look at race and try to apply it as a discrete theory. Excluding things like socioeconomics and environment and things like that. And one thing I do feel compelled to say, this is based on Dr. Wilson here about, being complicit in things. I would like to just go on record, since I have posted this to my Facebook page as well. I will go on record to say that I do not believe being gay is a sin. So I just wanted to go ahead and speak my truth to that, because I don't believe it's a sin, and I do believe in LGBTQ plus rights and all of that. So I just wanted to go ahead and say that.
I'll go ahead and say I agree with you. I do too.
I concur. I'm with you.
It's unanimous.
Man, I prefer the preacher man Marvin. That was his.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, everybody know disclaimer. I don't, especially on this show and in real life, I never speak for anybody else. I speak for myself. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's a difference between me as an individual. There's a difference between Marvin, and there's a difference between a minister. You know what I mean? Because that's a whole nother subject in itself. Because sometimes
It
my
is.
personal views disagree with my belief system. But as an ordained minister, I feel an oath or obligation to preach a certain thing, whether I agree with it or not, so to speak. You know what I mean?
We need to talk privately on this.
Yeah, Yeah, we definitely. And
I
we
mean,
had
that
whole
would be a
nother
cool
on that.
show. That
That
would be a
would be a
cool
great
show in and of
show.
itself.
It's a good show. Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
would
It
be.
really would, yeah.
And
There's a
you were
lot-
saying,
there's a lot of
Shauna, that you
issues.
wasn't sure, but from the research that I did, I want to say that the actual phrase critical race theory was termed in the 70s by Kimberly Crenshaw.
Okay.
She was the one that actually came up with that term, so to speak, or coined the term critical race theory, which, like I said, her name was Kimberly. Is credited to Derek Bell and everyone else, but Kimberly Crenshaw was the one that actually came up with that specific term.
So, and one other thing I wanted to bring up. So even though CRT as a pure theory isn't taught in schools, it is embedded within instructional practices that teachers already do. So, a lot of educators, I'm sure Cindi and Dr. Wilson here have heard of, culturally relevant teaching, culturally responsive teaching, and things like that. Those are strategies that teachers use to reach their students of color, because I would bet money, I know I'm exaggerating here, but I would bet money that there is no teacher in this country that doesn't know that there is a gap, like an achievement and opportunity gap between white students and students of color. And that gap has been there for decades. It's been there, for a very, very long time. And so out of, and so because of that, again, researchers, I keep going back to Gloria Ladson-Billings because she's a big deal in the education research world, but they come up with these instructional practices that are meant to address those unique needs of students of color. So going back to the counter storytelling that Dr. Wilson was talking about, when we do things as teachers, when we do things like introduce stories with Black characters or with Latino characters or Black experiences or Latino experiences or any experiences of people of color, that is actually a CRT tenet that's just embedded in instructional practice. So, yes, I agree that we are not, like, teachers are not like teaching the theory in its purest form, but there are elements and components of it that are already embedded in our instructional practices and have been for years.
Right.
Yeah. And
Well,
so,
you're right there. Let me ask this question with all you guys being educators. Is there a way to, as a teacher, so to speak, disassociate your personal views while actually teaching something?
I think
Or how do you manage that?
I think that's hard because I think at the end of the day, we're all human. And I think a person's nature will come out in some kind of way, as much as you try not to. It may be unconscious. Some people, I think do a good job with managing who they are. But I think that's a tough one. So, because sometimes it comes out. I think you've seen stories across the country where teachers might have said something that was inappropriate or racially insensitive. Matter of fact, I'll give you a perfect example. About a couple of months ago, the teacher from Jersey City, he said something to one of the students there, but saying, oh my God, he went on this racist rant. I'll try to pull it up while you're on. But I know he went on like basically a racist rant in front of everyone. It was doing a virtual classroom. Teacher from Jersey City. I'll pull it up. I can't think of the person's name, and I don't remember all the details, but I know he went on like a racist rant in front of everyone. Everyone was just like appalled. And I'm just like, well, that's who he always was. He just kept it hidden. Like, you know what I mean? So sometimes, depending on the context, the situation, and even the person, it's really a hard thing not to, because I'll be perfectly honest with you. I remember when I was in the classroom, I would always put my disclaimer out there, like how I viewed something or what my reservation, so on and so forth, just to say, because you're dealing with kids. I think Cindi or Shauna both might have mentioned it as well at some point. When you're in the classroom, you're dealing with impressionable minds. If you're primary level, middle school level, or high school level. Those students, I don't care what age range, they are very impressionable. They do not know everything. They are looking to you to guide them. They're looking to you to teach them. And so it becomes your job and duty to value that space. And that is so important. You know what I mean? And so if you have reservations or or anything like that, you have to be aware of your LGBT community. You have to be aware of feminism. You have to be aware of Asian, xenophobia. You have to be aware of the oppression of Black folks. You have to be aware of the oppression of Latino folks, because you have a cross section of students in your classroom, depending on where you are sometimes. But you have such a cross mix of students in your classroom that space becomes so delicate that the person giving the instruction has a lot of power, and can be very dangerous. So
Right.
it's a mouthful, but that's a very hard thing not to say, that someone's own personal beliefs doesn't spill into the classroom.
I would imagine so. It just made me, while Shauna was talking, it just made me think that, to ask that. I got a couple of comments here in the comment section. Penny Mary Van says, thanks for tuning in, Penny. She says, very true. Eventually you go off script if you are conscious of systematic racism. Leonard, what's up, L Dog? L says, teachers must do the work to check their implicit bias and their explicit bias they bring to the classroom.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
True.
Exactly.
Leonard's absolutely right. And I think Leonard's down there in Maryland, I think.
Yeah, Leonard's in Maryland.
Yeah.
22 years in the educational field.
Yeah.
My classmate. All good things. Educating the youth.
While you're talking, and the ladies are talking, I just want to look up that thing from Jersey City, because, like I said, that literally just happened not too long ago, like a couple of months ago, so something like that.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Shauna. I just wanted to ask that while you were talking about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree exactly with what Dr. Wilson said. Is I don't think you can detach how you feel, or as the comment said, like that we all have these implicit biases. Even Black teachers have internalized racism, where we have been conditioned to associate negative stereotypes with our own people. And so, and you can even check this, like Harvard has this implicit bias test that you can actually go in and you can take this test. As far as I know, it's free. I haven't taken it in several years, but yeah, I had internalized racism. Like I definitely had negative associations with, even though I love my people, it's not like it's a conscious thing, but it's just social conditioning that you've had all your life. And so so you bring, when we were talking about teaching and education, teachers bring all of that with them into the classroom. And so just like your commenter said, they have to check that. They have to know that. They have to first know that they harbor these implicit biases. Critical race theory is one way to do that. It's not the only way, but it is one way to educate teachers around that. And then they have to know how to check it and keep it in check. Nobody is saying that you can't have these, but to me, that ship has sailed. Like we all have biases. So it's not about you shouldn't have them. You're a horrible human being if you have implicit biases. To me, that's not it. That's not the argument. The argument is, let's just assume we all have them and be on the lookout for them and know how to keep them in check so that they don't damage these impressionable minds, like you're saying. And that's just in the education realm. I mean, in general, when you're engaging with people just in society, period, just have those biases in check,
Right.
Marvin,
and again, like you say, not just because you have a bias, a personal bias, does not equate to racism either. Back earlier, I was saying, with the power of words, like because I say something and you consider it bias, that does not make me a racist. You see what I'm saying? Or you're on the opposite end. Just because you're opposed to what I think, you know what I mean? I think so many times we're so confrontational in the social atmosphere that we're in now, that everybody's quick to get so defensive.
Right.
If you're speaking up for these rights, then you must be a racist, or you don't believe that there's such a thing as white privilege. And, we get into all these minute things, and I feel like as long as we going back and forth on basic things that are totally irrelevant like that, and we can never get the true change.
Right.
Marvin, I'll put the link in the chat box for
okay, I see it.
Viewers, feel free. But Cindi and Shauna, I put in.
Yo, shout out! We got another comment here. This bias is taught in many teachers' educational programs. Thank you for the comment, Miss Linda, and thank you for tuning in. That's my second grade teacher, y'all, tuning in tonight as well.
Nice.
Just as diversity training is required on police force, public educators, professors, teachers, administrators are not required to complete implicit and explicit biases. Yeah, that's good. Rochelle comments, to educators yearly do refreshers or something like CEUs to stay current with the news ways of addressing certain lessons with their students and how they should be addressed when it comes to different cultural and traditional beliefs. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Rochelle.
And what I will say about equity training, so I taught and worked for a long time in a very progressive school district right here in the Triangle, and it was very common and still is common for teachers, administrators, the superintendent, students to talk about racial equity and diversity and inclusion and things like that. But what I will say is that in my experience, it goes deeper than just the trainings. It's going to have to be a mindset shift.
Yeah.
And so going back to how critical race theory, and again, this isn't the only theory, because like you said, Marvin, it is a theory. In my own dissertation, I do talk about the limitations of critical race theory because I'm doing my due diligence as a researcher. So I am acknowledging what I see as a researcher as limitations in the context of the research that I'm doing. But getting back to my point, it is a theory, but it is a helpful way to frame race relations in the country. And it to me, it's a way, and like I said, it's to me probably because I've studied it for so long, but it can be a way to help shift that mindset. Because critical race theory does lay out a very logical explanation for how our country is structured. And to me, it does it in a way that's not assigning blame. It's just, it is what it is.
Right.
And once we get through once we understand that it is what it is, then you can start to kind of shift how you view society and the world. Like, to me, there's no going back. Like, I can't unknow the things that I know now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be the one good thing about critical race theory kind of blowing up in the news recently, is that people like yourself, Marvin, that have taken it upon themselves to Google it and research it on their own can actually, it's getting a wider audience now. Now, Cindi, I definitely agree. It is totally political. Like I definitely
believe
it's
just been perverted.
It has been. I read a news article. I can't remember the publication, but in this news article, their argument was that it's the GOP's way of setting up a midterm election platform. Like, when the midterm elections come up, this is going to be their platform.
Yeah.
And they're rallying the troops. And so, but on the other end of it, though, it is at least getting exposure. It's piquing people's curiosity and interest, and they're looking at it.
Hopefully more people will delve in and do just a little bit of research to find out the truth.
Absolutely.
Like you said, Cindi, before you jump on the protest and the picket line,
Yeah,
Understand what it is that
Understand what
you're
they're
fighting
doing.
that you're
for
fighting
or
for,
against.
right?
Either one.
That's true.
But don't just show up
Right.
Yeah,
with no information. You know what I
and
mean?
don't take somebody else's word for it. Do your own
Exactly.
homework.
Yeah.
And it's funny that I was watching and doing some of my research. It's funny that you would say that. I was watching this one guy go back and forth with Mark Lamont Hill. And Lamont Hill was asking him one specific question.
Oh, I know
Like,
what you're talking about. I saw
Have
that.
you read
Yeah.
or have you studied, have you taken a class in critical race theory whatsoever, or are you just basing this off of things that you heard? Dude spent 20 minutes and would not answer the question. Why?
Right.
Because
Going
he
back
was
on
going
him.
based off of things
Yeah.
that he was told. He had
Mm.
never read an article whatsoever. He had
Mm-mm.
never, and it's funny how the people that are so opposed to it, that are outraged, most of them don't have the information. They don't have the
No.
education about what it is that they're talking about. But
Yeah.
and a sign of that to me is, and like I said, I've only been studying this last 3-4 weeks. But critical race theory is not the same thing as Project 1619.
No,
You know what I mean? But they try to every argument that I've seen, they always bring
they
both of
lump them together.
like they're the same exact thing. No, they're not. They're two different, completely, totally different things. So you're saying, let me get to one of these questions here. So you're saying training does not help to improve the growth mindset. Training exposes the concept, but the person has to do the work or reflect for the mind shift. I guess that was in response to what you were saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And absolutely. I mean, we're obviously not going to get rid of trainings for teachers. I mean, just like you would want a doctor that's been in the field for 30 years, you hope he has had some current training.
Yeah.
We want teachers also, teachers, administrators, anybody that touches the lives of kids, we want them to definitely have trainings. But in response to that comment, yes, there is more work. It's not like you sit in a day-long training, get all this equity information, and then boom, you're able to apply it. Equity work is hard work, and it starts with reflection. And I do believe that question referenced reflection. So yes, it takes reflection, but not just reflection, it takes action. So you first reflect on, to me, in my experience, personally as a teacher and as a researcher, you first have to reflect on your own positionality. Like, who am I in the food chain? Like, if I'm a white teacher, who am I? What privilege? I know we were tossing around white privilege, but honestly, what privilege do I have that makes me blind to the barriers that my students of color face? Okay, that's step one. All right, that's step one. Then the next step is to figure out how I can either use that positionality to, or how I can use that awareness to make sure I'm interacting with my students of color in a way that's beneficial for them, in a way that's not coming from like a deficit mindset. Because another thing is, like, when you get into teacher training around white privilege and white fragility and all those buzzwords in the equity world, sometimes what happens is what you don't want to have happen. Sometimes what happens is the white teacher then begins to treat the Black kid like they are this like charity case, and that they're starting to, treat them with these white gloves, like, oh my gosh, so much has been done to you and your people. And yes, it's important to recognize that, but that does not help them. That does not help a student if you come at them with a deficit mindset. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is training alone, like the types of, and a little background about my role in the district. So I was the director of professional learning for the entire district that I worked for. So I know how, trainings operate typically. And what I was hoping to change with our equity trainings was just that, making sure that it wasn't just like this day-long training that you take and then you hope for the best, like toss the information out and then just hope that the teachers apply it. It takes coaching, and this district was fortunate enough to have equity coaches. So those coaches can help the teachers do that reflective work and do that hard work that is messy and emotionally draining, which is why we need to pay teachers more, because it is intense work. So that's just kind of my point of view around the training piece.
As far as that, Penny says, absolutely. I have worked in public school, public education, and higher education. Thank you for the clarification. All right. Yeah, I got, okay, that was the last comment there. All right, so from going out, I want each of you to kind of hit on this, because I definitely feel like we definitely need to do another show, getting more into the whole teaching of slavery. How is it that we do teach this? Do we acknowledge the fact that there is this thing called system racism? Do we believe that is a real thing? And it's like, I don't like I said, I can only speak for myself. I don't understand how, when you read the Declaration of Independence and these different documents, even the line that all men are created equal. Okay, that had nothing to do when they wrote that was not including black men.
No.
Okay, that was not including white women. It meant exactly what it said, that all men are created equal. Now, when they say all
really
men,
all white men
exactly
are
all men
created.
Exactly. All men like us are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
Not the king in Nairobi, not the king.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So we got to keep stuff in proper context. But I do believe that it is important that we do teach these things and educate on these things, because one of the previous guests, Kevin Danley, Dr. Danley, he was on and he was talking about that. And I believe one of the questions that I asked him, did he see a day, do he believe that we will ever get to a place where we as a country can truly heal? And he was like, because me personally, I don't think that we'll ever see it. I know we won't see it in my lifetime anyway. I don't know if we'll ever see it, because I'm not sure that the world will last long enough for it to come into existence. But his thing was that gave me hope and optimism was, he said, I believe so, because these younger generations, they're not thinking like the people of old.
Right.
Even though your father and your grandfather might be racist, Billy like, look, Raheem ain't never did nothing to me. He taught me how to do a crossover, so I'm going to Raheem's house for dinner, and vice versa. Right. You know what I mean? Right. They're not confined by, which is why I thought you brought up an interesting point. And like I said, we can get on that too on the next show whenever you guys can fit it into your schedule. But you said something that was interesting to me, Shauna, like you can't unlearn what you learn. And I think that I agree to disagree with that, because I think that sometimes that's what's necessary. When you're talking about personal biases, things that we have learned, things that we have picked up inadvertently, you know what I mean? Sometimes we will learn, you know what? That was kind of offensive to other people, but because that's the way I am, it's not cool for me to just accept that. So I think that sometimes just because we have learned things, I think sometimes we do have to unlearn things so that we can truly properly heal, because I learned, a lot of things that I've said over the course of years, it was highly offensive to other people. You know what I mean? Or things of that nature there. And it brings me to, when we talk about race, me and my brother were having a conversation. It's funny to me how, in the black community, you'll take a character like Archie Bunker, right? And Archie was one of the biggest racists ever. Now, I have no problem disassociating comedy versus what it is. Me personally, I was a fan of Archie Bunker, because every time he opened up his mouth, it showed how ignorant and stupid he was. But more importantly, it showed me that he was speaking for a different demographic. Not all white men, you see what I'm saying? But there was somebody that could relate to that character. Yeah. But in the black community, it was frowned upon to be a fan of Archie Bunker. But we have no problem with George Jefferson, he's a black man, but George was a racist. George was racist. So it's like, I think back to that, what I was talking about as far as learned behaviors. You know what I mean? Just because you were taught that something is okay does not mean that it's necessarily okay or not offensive to someone else. So I think a lot of times that we have to unlearn some of these behaviors to be sympathetic. Now, again, I already said I don't believe that everybody should get a trophy, but I do believe that as another human being, male, female, no matter what your nationality is, I do believe that part of me being a human and a so-called man of God, I should at least take your feelings into consideration and how my words may affect you or have an impact on how you see me or how you may think about certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no, I agree. I think that I think that's part of like the implicit bias training, you know. And I think what I was referring to, I hadn't even thought about it from the point of view you were taking it, Marvin, but I think what I was referring to is, you know, when you open your what it is I can't unsee is what I know about the depth of our racist society. You know, I knew, you know, as a Black person, I don't think many Black people grow up not realizing that Black people have struggled, you know. So of course, growing up, I knew Black people struggled, but it wasn't until like I started doing graduate studies and things like that that I understood just how like deeply rooted it was. And so that's what I meant. Like, I can't unsee that now. Like, I can't, like, there's some things you just can't unknow. Like, once your mind or, you know, has been exposed to, you know, something different, something new, like your eyes are just open.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you just can't close them. But no, you raised a good point though. I absolutely.
It's like I watch a lot of court TV, right? So you know you see it all the time in a trial where the witness will say something and the judge says, sustain, you got to strike that. Like, you can't unhear what you just heard.
Right, exactly.
There's no way in the world when I go in the jury booth that I can't factor that in, even though you told me I can't use that because it's already there. I heard it already.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of times
I'm with you.
Intentionally,
yeah. But like I said, we definitely gonna do another show. I'm gonna get with you guys to see when you guys can do this again. But I want to give each one of you guys a chance to go back around one more time and close out whatever remarks that you have concerning this, concerning slavery, and what you guys want to talk about and when you guys want to do it. I will start with you, Cindi.
All right. Well, I taught elementary, lower elementary mostly. So I didn't really get into a lot of the slavery. I didn't get into a lot of that type of history. It was very generic and it didn't get into specifics, I guess is a way of putting it. But I do know when I reflect back on my education, because I'm 66, so, and I went to school in Texas. There's so much as an adult, actually like in the last 10 years, that I've learned that I never learned in school. I had never learned about the Declaration of Causes. That was not taught. I had no idea. We were taught that the Civil War was basically fought for states' rights. Okay.
I can see that. I'm not laughing at you.
No one happened to mention the part that it was states' rights to own slaves.
Exactly.
Okay. They left that part out. As an educator, it bothers me that we're so concerned with teaching feel-good education instead of truth. Because if we don't learn the truth and we don't see the good, the bad, and the ugly, then we will never learn from it, and we are doomed to repeat it again. It may be a generation or two later, but you take the Holocaust. There's a lot of kids growing up that don't have a clue what that's about. They don't know the severity. They don't know how it happened. They don't know what led up to it. They don't know how that could go on and no one said anything or did anything. They don't understand. We don't teach it.
And
Not
to be fair, Cindy, while you're right there, I actually looked it up. In Germany, do you know that that is part of the curriculum in Germany for them
and
to
it
teach
should
the
be.
Holocaust?
It should
Exactly.
be. And
Exactly.
it should be part of ours too.
And it's not teaching the young German kids to grow up and kill the Nazis. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not teaching.
It's
those
not making them feel guilty for doing it either.
Exactly. It's not.
It
no
is
hate.
history. This is
Telling
how
the
we
truth.
learn to improve.
Yeah.
We don't allow our kids to get away with stuff and never bring it back up. I mean, if a kid gets in trouble for doing something, and I'm talking about our own personal kids, kid gets in trouble for doing something, as a parent, you look for hints of that again so that you can hopefully prevent that from reoccurring.
Mhm.
Same thing with education, same thing with world events. We need to teach the truth, not a watered down, feel good, don't offend me education, but the real thing. And, granted, elementary school, you're not going to get that. But generally, by the time a kid's in high school, they're emotionally equipped to handle the truth. I mean, sometimes history can't be worse than what they live through daily. So, I just would like to see our educational system go back to teaching real, honest facts.
Truth. Like, we start even with the state of Alabama. I never forget, it's been a few years now, but I want to say as recent as 2014, they were still having black and white proms in high school in 2014.
Wow.
Like, why is that not even a subconscious thought to ask them?
Yeah.
Why can we have class together but we have separate proms?
Mm-hmm.
Make that make sense for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's sad. It's sad. And like you say, I mean, trust me. The only way that you can truly get over, only way that you can truly heal, that's the word I like to choose to use, is heal, is by confronting it truthfully.
Yes.
There's no other way around it.
Facing
you may
it.
shed some tears, and you may feel some type of way. I never forget when they first put TVs in our schools back in the 90s, they brought the TVs in our room. But if you remember, I transferred into West Side, and real quickly, I started school here in Wilmington, North Carolina, New Hanover High. And they showed the movie Mississippi Burning. Now, coming from North, I never went to school with white children.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had one guy in my freshman year, and then we had another one that came in when I was a senior. So the only white people that I would see were teachers. Okay. Having said that, I go to Wilmington, where I'm seeing a sea full of white people, black people sprinkling in, some Asians sprinkled in. And it was like, after watching that movie, what it did to me, with the way it made me feel, not knowing this before watching this, I literally didn't go to school for 2 days because I didn't want to be around any white people. Not because I was hating white people, not because I wanted to beat up any white people. It just made me feel totally uncomfortable because at this age, at the age of 15, this is the first time that I'm ever hearing this. So I get what you're saying, Cindy. Yeah, kindergarten, it may be too early, but that's a whole nother conversation. Like, I always have this with people that are adopted. Like, when do you tell the child that they're adopted versus do you tell them at all?
Oh, I can do that one because I'm adopted too.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I'm definitely trying to put together a show with adoptees and adoptee families. So I would definitely love for you to be on that with us. But it's like, I think that
honesty.
Either way, we have to confront what we don't want to confront.
Right.
And that's the only way we're going to ever get where we need to be.
That's exactly right.
Oh, so Jennifer said we had a white girl too. I don't remember her. But we had 2 white students. Her name was Shauna.
I remember her. Yeah.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Yeah, I forgot. It's going back some
My
time.
bad, Shauna. I ain't remember. I don't remember. I don't remember a white girl there. But what you got for us, Ed?
I think I would be very simple in saying, be the change that you want to be, or that you want to. I'm sorry, not be the change that you want to be. Be the change that you want to see. I think as educators, this is a thankless job at times. You obviously don't do it for the money because none of us are balling out of control like that. But you do it because you genuinely have a desire or interest in, seeing the best in kids or doing right by kids and serving, kids and seeing them grow. And so I would just encourage your viewers as well as the esteemed ladies here tonight to never take for granted, I don't want to sound cliche, but you don't want to take for granted the power that you have when you're in front of a group of students. You should never minimize how much power and impact you can have on a child. And you never know, just, that one student who you think you may not be reaching, you never know how much you influence a kid until you see them years later.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, just a testament to what you just said. Again, this is my second grade teacher that's in the comments.
Yeah.
I remember her clearly, vividly. I could go back and tell you all my elementary school teachers, but I remember Miss Lewis, and because she was one of my favorite teachers. She made learning really fun. Like, you wanted to learn when you went to her class. Like, oh, what am I gonna learn today? Like, every day you went to school, what am I gonna learn? What am I gonna learn? Here it is. I'm a 45-year-old man saying this, and I have my second grade teacher viewing the show. So definitely teachers out there, and there are other teachers that are in the chats, in the comments, that are viewing. But like you say, Ed, understand the power that you possess as an educator. That's very important. Ms. Shauna?
Yeah, so I think I'll kind of take a little bit of what Dr. Wilson and Cindi said. So my work with critical race theory and just equity in education, period, is really personal for me because I think about, I have two daughters who are in elementary school. And so, to Dr. Wilson's point about, be the change you want to see, I'm doing this, like I'm hopping on any platform I can possibly find to spread my, or raise awareness about the need to directly talk about race in our education system, because our education system is not going to change unless we directly address race. And yes, that has to come with a lot of training. It has to come with a lot of just common understanding. So there's a lot of work to do with that. But I look at my own girls and I'm like, and I want better for them. I want better than when I was in school. And I'm not even sure what shortcomings I faced, but I'm sure I did, face some. And I know we've been talking about how young is too young. And I actually think that elementary age kids are ready. I mean, my own daughters, when they were 4, they were like, why aren't there any brown people in Frozen, the movie Frozen? Why aren't there brown people in this? Why aren't there brown? Now, granted, it could be because they're my children and I am very open with them. And I do talk about race. I talk about sexuality. I talk about all that stuff with them. But they are very much aware of their race. They're very much aware of the Civil War and what the fight was for. And they're very much aware about the civil rights movement. And they, as far as I can tell, they can handle it. And so I guess in closing, my girls are my reason, they're my why. I know everybody has a different one, but for me, that is my why. And that is what's driving me. And that is what's motivating me. And like I said, I'm going to hop on whatever platform I can hop on to raise awareness, in service of, what I can do for my girls. And in the meantime, for other children as well.
Well, you will definitely be back on this platform. I'm extending an invitation to you now. We're gonna talk off camera and see once we wrap up. Real quick before I do go though, Cindi, I want to ask you just something interesting to me. You said a lot of these things you learned in the last 10 years. You're a native of Texas, been in Texas all your life. When did you become aware of Juneteenth in Galveston, Texas?
I had always, I guess, as far back as I can remember, I knew Juneteenth. I don't recall. I would say probably within the last 10 years, I actually realized the significance of it and the connection to Galveston.
Gotcha.
I had known that the Emancipation Proclamation went out, and there was 2 years before slaves realized they were free in the South. I knew that part. I didn't connect Juneteenth to that,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until probably 10 years ago, and it's like the light bulb came on. I'm like, oh, now I get it. You know, I don't think I'd ever heard the Galveston part.
Gotcha.
You know,
I heard it, but I don't know anything at all about Texas. So I would just
it wasn't taught. It wasn't taught. It wasn't taught. No, a lot of what I picked up on has been just through conversations and through. But don't feel bad. There was a whole lot. I mean, I went to Louisiana and had to teach on Mardi Gras, and I didn't know what Mardi Gras was. So it's not my first time. Yeah, it's not my first time to be in the dark.
That's funny. That's good, man.
It's kind of like, you know, you just, wherever you go, you kind of learn something. So
Absolutely.
I got a crash course in Mardi Gras.
Cool deal, man. Again, man, I want to thank all you guys for being here. I truly, truly appreciate it. I truly appreciate the information. This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. You guys tune in next week. We're going to have another show for you as well. And as usual, in signing off, DeAndre and Life should know that Daddy loves you intentionally, but I also love you unconditionally. So next week, peace.